Let's get into some Vancouver Canucks talk. Now, first off, the Canucks do play a game later today. I can't watch that. I got Richmond Sockeyes hockey, so I'm going to be the play-by-play guy over there. You can check us out at mixlr.com/Richmond Sockeyes. Listen to the game for free. You can listen to me commentate, so that will be nice. But as a result, I won't be able to actually watch the Vancouver Canucks play the Carolina Hurricanes tonight at 7 p.m. I'll be doing other things, but instead I wanted to talk about the Canucks here. It may be a little bit late into the afternoon, so you can kind of treat this as your little pre-game, I guess, discussion for the Canucks and the Hurricanes, but let's talk about some Vancouver Canucks trade rumors, because this actually came up on Sportsnet just a little bit ago. It's an article from Iain MacIntyre from yesterday in the evening, talking about the Vancouver Canucks and their potential plans, what they would like to do, and the overall idea of what they want to do for their team going forward. The name of the article is this: Jim Benning is still looking for a top 6 forward to bolster the Canucks roster. And it's a really nice read. It's a good few quotes here from Benning, and MacIntyre goes over the team and different players within the team, so I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read that. But let's talk about the Vancouver Canucks and adding a top 6 forward. This is interesting, because right away, when I read that the Canucks are looking to add a top 6 forward, the first thing that entered my mind was, hey, you guys have Sven Baertschi with the Utica Comets. Why not just add him? But then I had to think about it a little bit, and I was like, I don't know, do they really see him as a top 6 guy? I may personally see Baertschi as a middle 6 or a top 6 forward, but if the Canucks don't, then screw it, they're going to go after another one, right? So overall, what we have here is a team that arguably does have a top 6 forward in their minor system, but apparently would like to go forward in acquiring another top 6 forward. Now at this point, there are 3 things to look at. First off, who would the Canucks target? Second off, where would they slot in the lineup? And third off, what exactly are we going to give up? Let's start backwards. Let's start off with the third thing, because I feel like after the JT Miller trade, which was the most recent trade wherein the Vancouver Canucks acquired a top 6 forward, things were really buzzing around returns and overall ideas of what exactly the Canucks are trying to do with their trades. So I think immediately, starting right off the bat here, the Vancouver Canucks and what they would give up for a top 6 forward does not include a first round pick. It's up in the air. We don't even know if we're going to have our first round pick this year. It depends on if the Canucks make the playoffs or not. So trading away the remainder of one of the 2 firsts and not having a guaranteed first this year or next year, completely out of the ballpark. I don't think that is going to happen here, because we know how much the Canucks love their firsts, and we know how much the fan base seemed to have loved their firsts. So a first round pick is probably not going to be in the mix, which leaves a few other things. Hey, we have prospects that we have that are very good. Would we be willing to trade any of those guys? And the immediate answer in most Canucks fans' head once I said that is probably no. There's no good or positive reception that would come out of trading a guy like, Podkolzin or a Hoglander or a Wu or a Tyler Madden. If the Vancouver Canucks touched these guys in a trade-like scenario, the fan base would absolutely implode. Now obviously that does depend on the return, but we saw how this fan base reacted when we traded a first-round pick that isn't even a prospect that has a name attached to him for JT Miller. We know how good JT Miller is today, but in hindsight, that was a pretty big overreaction to the trade. Now, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like the fan reaction is going to be the only thing that stops the Vancouver Canucks from trading a Hoglander or whatever, but if the Vancouver Canucks want to make a trade for a top 6 forward, they're going to have to go somewhere that most people wouldn't expect. The first round pick, probably not. A roster player, hey, probably not, honestly. if we're trying to improve our roster, we would need to keep the guys that we do have and add on to that. If not, you would want to trade away like a Beagle or a Roussel or a Sutter or an Eriksson or whoever you could get out, but what exactly is the value you're getting back? Because those guys aren't too valuable, and if you wanted to trade one of those for a top 6 forward, you would need to add a prospect or a pick regardless. So either or, something in the future is getting touched, and whether that's the prospect or a later pick, we don't know. It only really works out when you have a bad scenario for a bad scenario. That's what we saw with the Goodbranson deal last year, where Tanner Pearson was added to the Vancouver Canucks. That was a really, really good situation for Tanner Pearson to come into after being in a rut in Pittsburgh. If the Vancouver Canucks are willing to capitalize and take a risk on another chance like that, then hey, I say go for it. Trade a guy like Louis Eriksson for somebody who is not really doing their best in their situation and their team right now and has a chance of becoming better with Vancouver. That's what we did with Pearson, but situations like that are few and far between. Things like Robbie Fabry being a bottom 6 guy on St. Louis, becoming a top 6 scorer with the Red Wings, things like that are hard to come by, but it is possible. So if the Vancouver Canucks really wanted to add a top 6 forward and make a trade that does look like a huge win by the time 2 or 3 weeks later rolls around, they're gonna have to be really selective and they're gonna have to scan the league well. That's in fact what Jim Benning says here in the little article. He talks about him and his relationship with other general managers. I try to keep in contact with all the other GMs in the league, and if there's something that fits and makes sense, we'll look at it. So obviously Benning is trying to keep the options open here, but as we said, there is no guarantee for anything. Let's go back over to that little list and talk about where exactly this player will slot in our lineup. Let's assume the Canucks trade a forward for a forward. We trade away a bottom 6 guy and a pick or a prospect for a top 6 guy. And all of a sudden, the Vancouver Canucks now have a top 6 of Miller, Pettersson, Besser, Horvat, whoever. You could have Pearson on that left side and somebody else on the right side, depending on if this player is right wing or left wing. Have Virtanen or Levo in that right side spot if we acquire a left wing player. But the Vancouver Canucks depth chart honestly looks pretty stacked by then. If you have a third line of Adam Gaudette, Antoine Roussel, and I don't know, Levo or Virtanen, or you have a third line of Gaudette, right side guy is like Virtanen, and you have a left side guy of like Tanner Pearson or whatever, that's pretty good as well. So the only way to go is up when we're adding a top 6 forward. Again, everything depends on each other. There is no guarantee. But in general, if the Canucks add a top 6 forward, things are looking pretty nice. So then on to the final question, who exactly would the Canucks add? To that, I have absolutely no idea. Absolutely no idea. I have no knowledge of the entirety of the league in the slightest to try to answer that question, and I know there are going to be a ton of other smarter people in the comments talking about specific players and talking about why these players could be potential trade targets, so I want you to go nuts in the comment section below before the game tonight. Just talk about players that could be traded, could be in this kind of idea that Benning is building up in his head. Hey, a top 6 forward that could be expendable and the Canucks could add onto their team. Who is that player? Talk about it in the comments below because I don't have any idea, nor do I believe I have the authority to comment on other team situations and comment on what other teams would be willing to do. I'm only really familiar with like 3 or 4 teams in the league, and I don't really think any of those teams would be willing to trade a forward, a top 6 forward nonetheless, to the Vancouver Canucks. But of course, it's a discussion to be had, and that's why I decided to make a video about it here today. Again, don't wait for me to make a post-game review on the Canucks versus the Hurricanes. In fact, post-game reviews don't seem to be getting all too much attention anyway, so I'm going to have to be reconsidering those and how I do them going into the future. If you have any suggestions, hey, leave them in the comments below as well. But I hope you enjoyed this little trade talk. So should I trust 99. And bye.